We were able to explain earlier that my academic work, we've been looking at the questions about how do we help people prevent, arrest, and reverse chronic diseases. I've been doing a lot of research over those years, asking the questions, can we get people to change behaviors? And if we do, what happens to those people? So the research is published in a lot of journals. We know more now than we've ever known. And we know enough now to change people's lives for the good, if we can just get them to do it. So the purpose of today's webinar is really to kind of demonstrate how our behaviors, what we eat, whether or not we move around, exercise, whether or not we use tobacco, our lifestyles can actually impact our lives by adding or taking away approximately 10 to 20 years of extra life. That's what this presentation is really about. So again, those of you who are joining us a little bit later, we had about 650 you sign up. You can ask questions at any time in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. So let's get started and let's go down this journey a little bit. Let me kind of show you where we are in the U.S. and the most recent changes that have occurred. If you'll look at this slide, in 1985, the states in dark blue had between 10 and 14% of the entire adult population was clinically obese. So that means they have a body mass index of greater than 30. They're obese. And so those dark blue states, it's 10 to 14% of every adult. So this is 1985, 86, 87, 1988, 89, 1990, 1991, we add a new color, 1992, 93, 94, 1995, 1996, 1997. We add a new color. We have now greater than 20% of every adult in those three states is clinically obese. 1998, 99, 2000, 2001, we add another color. Greater than 25% of the adults are obese. So that's more than 10 years ago. 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, we add another new color. Greater than 30% of adults. 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, and the most recent slide, 2010. We have this big swath from Texas all the way up to Maryland, where we now have greater than 30% of every adult is clinically obese. So this data shows that in the last few years, approximately 25 years, we've had a dramatic increase in the number of adults who are overweight. And you can see it's worse in the Deep South, but it heads up to Michigan, the Upper Peninsula. The fun thing about our webinar today is this webinar was promoted to all of our WellSteps users. And we had WellSteps users in every state. So this map really represents all of you. By the way, a special call out to some of our listeners up in Idaho. Idaho, you can see on our map, is 25 to 29% of the population is clinically obese. And by the way, this data is 5 years old. It's gotten worse since then. In fact, another way to look at this data is to say what percentage of Americans are overweight or obese. So that's not just obese, but excess weight at all, being overweight or obese. And this is what we have from the current and the projected. So right now we're at about 65% of every adult is overweight or obese in the US, and we project in 2020 that number is going to be close to 75% of every adult. Here's where this discussion gets really interesting. The maps show West Virginia and California and Idaho and Maryland and Vermont and Maine as if this were some kind of American phenomena that's going on. But here is the same data from England and Canada and Austria and France and Korea. Now they might start a little lower, but the trend is up for every country in the world. Recently I've been spending a lot of time in Brazil working with a lot of companies down there. That's Brazil in red. So sometimes we consider this to be a local phenomenon. This is a result of our US economy and the way we live our lives, when in reality the same changes that are going on here in our culture and the way we live our lives are also going on around the globe. This is a global phenomena that impacts us. So what? What happens? So what? We have a little extra weight. Well, we know that the average man in the United States dies at around 74 years of age if he has a normal weight. If that same man is overweight or obese, he dies between 3 and about 7 years before his time. Having the extra weight reduces how long we live. It reduces lifespan. Now, if the average man makes it to 74.4 years of age at time of death, the average woman makes it to right around 80. 80 is the average lifespan for most women. I always like to joke, if you look at that graph, there's almost a 6-year difference between the men and the women. You know why there's a 6-year difference between the men and the women? It's because men are stupid, because we do really stupid, dangerous things, and it costs us 6 years of life. If you've ever watched the YouTube videos of people doing outrageous things, it's pretty much all men. No, yeah, it's true. We're risk takers. We have more chronic disease. We also have a higher incidence of some chronic diseases. But for the women who are normal weight, they make it to age 80. If they're overweight or obese, their lifespans will be cut short between 3 and 6 years. So it's going to shorten lifespan. What worries us the most about this is not really this graph. It's what comes next. As we change our behaviors, as we change what we eat, we change our serving sizes, we gain body weight, we're less physically active. The first real disease we hear about is diabetes, type 2 diabetes. So here's the same kind of maps, only this is in 1994. And instead of looking at obesity, we're looking at type 2 diabetes prevalence. So in the dark orange states, in this particular map, South Carolina, approximately 6% of the adults in 1994 were type 2 diabetic. Now, this is not type 1 diabetes or juvenile youth diabetes. This is adult onset diabetes, the kind that's associated with obesity. So here's 1994, 95, 96, 1997, 1998. We add a new color. 7 to 9% of every adult is type 2 diabetic. 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, we add new colors. Now we're almost greater than 10% of every adult in these dark red states is type 2 diabetic. 2004, 2005, 6, 2007, 2008, and 2009. Again, this data is 6 years old. But at this data set, on average, some states are higher than 10% of every adult is type 2 diabetic. Now, isn't it interesting that the diabetes maps and the obesity maps line up almost perfectly? They're like mirror images of each other when we look at them in this way. The average man makes it to 74.4. If he's diabetic, the average age at death, 62.6. So there's a 12-year reduction for the men, and for the women, there's almost a 14-year reduction in lifespan for those who are type 2 diabetic. So there's a penalty associated with this new lifestyle. That penalty ultimately results in additional diseases like obesity and diabetes. But at the end of the day, what it really means is it impacts lifespan. So I'm going to show you one more map, and then we'll stop using maps for a minute. This map is at the county level. It's not just states. This is county data. And this is life expectancy, or how long people live by county. And you can see the dark blue have the shortest lifespans. The yellow and the light greens have the longest lifespans. There's a 10-year difference between the two. People in the Deep South and in the red states die 10 years earlier than those in the yellow states. It's kind of the average. And we see, again, this map looks very similar to the others. All right, enough doom and gloom about what's happened, but something definitely has happened to us. Something has changed. We kind of started off talking about obesity and how the obesity thing has really changed. But I want to just stop for a minute and just pause. If 65% of the population in the United States is overweight or obese, that means there's still a pretty good portion, 35% of us, who are not overweight or obese. And sometimes we look at this data and we think, well, I'm not really struggling with my weight. I really don't have a whole lot to worry about. Kind of like this guy right here. Got a middle-aged gentleman. He's on the treadmill. He's doing an EKG test to test his heart. He's not particularly overweight or obese. What I'm trying to make a point with this is just because we're not overweight doesn't mean we don't need to have healthy lifestyles. A thin, healthy body is actually a great way to help your health, but it's not the only thing we need to be doing. And to make that really clear for everyone, I like to use this statistic. Most smokers die of heart disease. And we associate lung cancer with smoking, but really, most smokers die of some form of cardiovascular disease. What people don't know is that if you're sedentary, if you don't move around much, I just don't move around much, your risk for cardiovascular disease is actually higher than if you were a smoker. So let me say that again. Your risk for cardiovascular disease and death is higher if you don't exercise than if you were a smoker. So those on the phone or those on the webinar today who are listening, just because you're not overweight or obese doesn't mean you're out of the woods. It means you need to have a healthy lifestyle to prevent all of the health risks that associate with disease. And when we ask the question, well, what lifestyles are we really talking about? And what diseases are really impacted? We do these really large epidemiologic studies where we look at hundreds of thousands of people, and we ask this simple question. What percentage of stroke or cancers or heart disease or diabetes, of all those cases, how many of them are really caused by a poor diet or lack of physical activity or using tobacco? And those three factors, poor diet, sedentary living, and tobacco use, actually explain 70% of every strokes. So if you know people who've had a stroke, family members, friends, relatives, 70% of all strokes are due to people eating the wrong kinds of foods, not moving around much, or using tobacco. 71% of all cancers, 82% of heart disease, and a full 91% of all type 2 diabetes are caused by the way people choose to live their lives. So there's something that's missing from this graph. Genetics. What's the genetic influence on these diseases? I mean, my grandfather had a heart attack, my dad had a heart attack, my brother had a heart attack. Dr. Aldana, I got the bad genes, man. We're all going to have heart attacks in my family. That's possible that it's genetic. It's more likely that you, your brother, your father, your grandmother, your grandfather, you all share exactly the same lifestyles. You eat the same foods, you have the same physical activity patterns, you may or may not use tobacco. Yes, it's mostly lifestyle. There's a little bit, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7% of all cases can be due to genetics. But those are really, really rare. They're the exception to the rule. Most of the chronic disease that we have today in the United States, most of the cancers, most of the heart attacks, is caused by the way we choose to live our lives. So this is something we have control over. This is not destiny that we're stuck with this. We can actually influence this. So far we've talked about the changes in our obesity, diabetes, the changes in our health status in this country, how it's dramatically worse now than it was. You know, some people look at this data and go, oh, well, I don't know, I just can't believe that. Go watch a World War II documentary and just look at the soldiers and the GIs walking around in those videos. Look how skinny everybody is. This is in the 40s. Just take a look at one of those old documentaries and look at how big people were. And then look around today. It becomes very apparent that something has changed. And there are some reasons why things have changed. In fact, to make that reason really clear to you, let's take a little quiz. Here's a question that I'd like you to think about, or a statement. I want you to think about a food that you crave. So picture in your mind a food that you really like, a food that you would really, really, really like to eat. Not just, you know, yeah, okay, something you think about, something you crave. Have you all got one of those foods in your mind? Okay, you got that food in your mind. Now answer this question. Which of these three ingredients are in the food that you crave? Salt, sugar, or fat? Are you thinking? I hear people all the time say, oh, Dr. Aldana, it's all three. All three foods are in my, ingredients are in my favorite food. And some guy goes, well, no, my favorite food is Meat Lover's Supreme Pizza. Okay, the pizza has the fat and the pizza has the salt. What do you eat with your Meat Lover's Supreme Pizza? I like to have a big Coke. Why? Because the sugar creates the perfect flavor environment. Because we crave salt, we crave sugar, we crave fat, especially when they're mixed in just the right ingredients, just the right amount. Some of you, foods that you're listing about craving, you're talking about ice cream, chocolate, maple bars. Some people might mention pizza or ribs or some food that you really like. You know what my favorite food was? My favorite food is bacon. Bacon's the salt and the fat. It's the perfect combination. I love it. I don't eat it very often because it's full of nitrates, and I know it's not very good for me. But that doesn't make me want to crave it. I do crave it. And when I crave it, something happens in my brain. I actually feel pleasure. A certain part of my brain lights up, and I feel pleasure associated with that experience. It's an emotional experience. That's why we use foods like ice cream or cake, and we actually get a pleasurable experience out of it. I get pleasure when I eat a piece of bacon. You know who knows this information better than anyone? Food scientists. People who prepare the different foods that we eat every day. They have worked tirelessly to create foods that are perfect to create an emotional experience for us. They have refined the art. There's a restaurant nationwide that is probably one of many, but it's an example I like to use, Cheesecake Factory. Their food is perfect combination of salt, sugar, and fat. Maybe it's not Cheesecake Factory. Maybe it's a cinnamon roll. You know, the sugar is there, the fat is there, it's got just the right amount of salt. Sometimes they'll let the baking smell roam through the halls. The airport does these. Cinnabon is the name of a company that does cinnamon rolls. You see them all the time. It creates an emotional experience when we eat this. This emotional experience happens to people all over the planet. So that today I can go to Karachi, Pakistan, and I can have an emotional experience. I can eat a Cinnabon in Karachi, Pakistan, and have that same experience because their brains are just like our brains. We experience it. So not long ago, I was on a day of travel, and I was working in a different city, and it was airport delay after airport delay, an uncomfortable flight, and it was not very pleasant, and it was raining, and I got in late. I was tired, and the lady at the counter said, "Welcome, Dr. Aldana. Would you like a hot chocolate chip cookie?" And I said, "You know, I have kind of had a hard day today. I would like one of those." So I ate it. Oh, and by the way, it was hot. They take it out of the microwave. Maybe you've experienced this. Maybe you've made your own. What happened to me as I stood there at the counter? I ate that chocolate ice cream, went straight to my brain, and I had an emotional experience, and all of my stress melted away. So the next day I walked by the counter on my way to my meetings, and I said, "You guys wouldn't happen to have any more of those cookies, would you?" Of course I asked. Why? Because it's amazing what the combination of salt, sugar, and fat can do to us. We buy the food, we taste the food, we crave the food, and we repeat. That's important if you want to make a successful business. Buy, taste, crave, repeat. And we do. Boy, do we ever. We have more fast food than ever to make this available to us. We have larger serving sizes. We eat an enormous amount of salt, sugar, and fat, and combined with the fact that we're less physically active, well, welcome to America. It's the new America. It's what we have become. We have changed our diets. We have changed our physical activity patterns. These are behaviors, and we're using foods that some people will consider addictive. It's kind of what I call the dark side of Westernization. It's the dark side of our culture. It's our new culture. It's kind of what we have become. I don't think anybody set out to create an unhealthy lifestyle and kill people with diabetes. And yet, that's what we have become. It's kind of this slippery slope. If I can make slightly larger serving sizes, people will come to my restaurant more often and I can make more money. So I make even larger serving sizes and even larger serving sizes. And I carefully add salt, sugar, and fat. This is really what I call that's the dark side of capitalism. It's whether it's chocolate and cookies or soda in the vending machine or Cinnabon sweet rolls at the airport or bacon. There's bacon conferences and there's bacon milkshakes and there's bacon, 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 bacon. Why? Because people have an emotional response to the salt and the fat. I was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin a few years ago, and I drove by a big billboard. It was for the hamburger place called Carver's. Carver's is a burger joint. And their billboard, in all its glory, had two things. It said Carver's, bacon and shakes. That was it. Bacon and shakes. So we eat bacon and shakes. It's what we do. It's delicious, it's inexpensive, it's hot, it's convenient. Oh, and by the way, you don't even have to get out of your car because they have a big drive-through. So we have become the fattest population in world history because we have become secularized. We have become part of the new culture that surrounds us, the new culture at every turn. We can see it at the grocery store and we go and select our foods. The foods are all there. These are so far from foods from their natural form. If we were to take one of our ancestors and walk down this aisle, perhaps the only thing they would even remotely recognize might be water. So we have completely altered our food landscape to promote salt, sugar, and fat. We don't even think twice about getting sugar in liquid form because this is the amount that we do in our sodas. We just consume it, and it is delicious, don't get me wrong. But it's a change that is all leading up to the fattest, perhaps unhealthiest population in world history, where we have more chronic disease and more obesity and diabetes than we've ever had before. It's kind of created a new normal. It's normal to do this. It's normal to have breakfast cereals. These breakfast cereals are nothing similar to their original form. If you think about these, they're highly processed, highly altered. In some cases, you don't even know what the original source of the food was. Add vitamins and some minerals and market the heck out of it. Welcome to America. One of my favorite commercials and one of my favorite boxes is this box of Cocoa Puff cereal. It's the epitome of unhealthy breakfast. I mean, if you were to create a breakfast food that really is designed to not do much good for your body, Cocoa Puffs is one we like to talk about. And yet, on the side of the box, there's the blessing and endorsement of the American Heart Association, who says right there, foods low in saturated fat are really good for you. This food is low in saturated fat. Well, so is a bowl of sugar. So is a lot of things. It doesn't mean we should be eating it. And this displays this dark underbelly. General Mills wants to make a lot of money selling cereal. The American Heart Association wants a lot of money to continue doing what it's doing, so the American Heart Association charges General Mills tens of thousands of dollars to put that label on their box. You, the unsuspecting consumer, will purchase the box because it's got the blessing of the American Heart Association on the side of it. It is the dark side of capitalism. Everybody wins. The food manufacturers win. American Heart Association wins. The shareholders win. The only people who lose is you. It's a win-win-lose relationship, repeated over and over and over. So here's the label on the back of a box that I saw the other day. I cut it out, took a picture of it. This product is to be enjoyed as part of a healthy, active lifestyle. You can learn more about nutrition and go to this website. This is a product. Here's the label on the back in big, bold letters. Can you guess what this might have come off of? Remember, this food is to be enjoyed as part of an active, healthy lifestyle. That's a pretty good endorsement for Sour Patch soft and chewy candies. So we do. But Dad, it's watermelon. It's watermelon flavored. Dad, it's got to be good for you. Besides, look at the label, Dad. It's to be enjoyed as part of a healthy, active lifestyle. So I want to be healthy and active. Let's get some. So we do. Maybe it's not cereal, or maybe it's not candy. Maybe it's I want to go to a restaurant and I'm going to have some all-American food. I'm going to have not just one big burger, I'm going to have two and a milkshake and some fries because after all, who doesn't want to be an American? I mean, it's all American food. If you don't eat food like this, you might as well be a communist. You want to fall in line and you want to salute and be patriotic and you want to be an American, so we eat and we eat and we eat. And when we get home and we want to go for a walk, sometimes it's hard because our society doesn't promote walking anymore. They kind of promoted walking here. You can go for a short walk on this sidewalk. It's just a little walk down the street and a turn around, and that's pretty much it. You can walk in the street next to all those cars like this lady's doing. No sidewalk. We drive cars now. Cars are good for business. Business is good for jobs. Jobs good for America. We promote a new economy. This is tough to do when there's no safe place to walk. Or you're going to go out for a walk, and obviously they're not really interested in having you walk very much, or you're certainly not a priority here. We do things like this. It's cheaper to not. And now I'm not saying we need to put sidewalks all over America. I am saying cars rule the day, and opportunities for physical activity have been greatly diminished. And you and I, despite our ancient old physiology, our old bodies, using this new world we're in, we now sit in traffic all day. It's the new culture. So, not surprisingly, we have the fattest population in world history. We have some of the worst diets. We have some of the worst physical activity patterns. Technology is amazing in all that it provides us with, but there's a dark side to all of it. You know, when we were ancient, our ancient ancestors, our greats, way back, you know the term hunt and gather. They were hunters and gatherers. They might have grown some food, but they hunted. I mean, it was a tough way to live. Well, today we live in a different world. How's that hunting and gathering going for you now if you live in suburbia? Here's a tightly packed, dense suburban sprawl. There's not much room for hunting and gathering anymore. Now we hunt and gather at Walmart. And we use highly processed food because it's what I see on TV, and they give me coupons to do that. In fact, the hunting and gathering food around the edges is way tucked in the back of the store where it's tough to get to. So it's changed. It's a big change. All right. Enough with this pessimistic, unhappy discussion we've had so far. What do we do about this? How do I get 10 to 20 years of extra life? How do I adapt my surroundings and my culture to enable me to have a healthy lifestyle? How do I make it easier to have a healthy lifestyle? How do I do this? Well, this is the hardest thing for humans to do. Changing behavior is as hard as it gets because there are so many forces working against us. The cost of fast food is very low. It's hot, it's convenient, it's delicious. You don't have to get out of your car. It's very difficult to overcome that. It's difficult to be physically active if you live in an environment where it's hard to be active. If it's a lot of deep snow, or if the weather's really hot, or you don't have access to any kind of equipment, or it's not a safe neighborhood. There's a lot of factors working against us. So when we talk about, what's the solution? We know the solution. The solution is to eat foods in their natural form, in their natural quantities, to be more physically active and to stop smoking. I mean, that's the solution, and it's easy. And I can show you the first slide here, real food. And I'm not talking, vegan or fully vegetarian. I'm just talking food in its natural form. Lots of whole grains, lots of fruits and vegetables, meat, dairy, fish, beans, eggs, nuts, maybe a little bit of yogurt and cheeses, very low amounts, and then very, very small amounts of sugars and oils at the very top. I mean, really, this is the kind of food that our ancestors ate for 1 million years. This is what they ate. And we got to get to that type of a diet. And therein lies the difficulty. It's hard to do. We need to be active. We need to find time to schedule our lives so that we can go out and be physically active, doing whatever activity you want. And I hear this all the time. Dr. Aldana, what's the best form of physical activity? What should I do? The best form is the thing that you like to do. That's the best one for you. It's what you like to do. If you get out and be active, working in your yard, cleaning, exercising, sports, whatever it is, staying active changes things dramatically. Combined with avoiding tobacco, and that's kind of the big ones, the big three. Having a healthy diet, being regularly physically active, and avoiding tobacco, that's the big three for 70 to 90% of all the major chronic diseases that we have. Those three items. Now, this is not the right place to talk about exactly how everybody succeeds at changing behavior. It's hard to do. You need to have a good reason to do it. If you don't have a good reason to change, you won't. You need to have support and help from other people. If you do it yourself, it's tougher. It's nice to have tools or skills or strategies or rules to help follow you. I mean, if you're going to exercise and you need some equipment, it's nice to have the equipment. There are things that help us change behavior, and we've incorporated a lot of those. No, we've incorporated every one of those in every WellSteps campaign that you participate in. And we are carefully creating and testing and validating every little video, every little task, every little thing that we do with every campaign is designed to help you adopt and maintain a healthy behavior, not just for the 6 months or the end of the campaign, forever. If we've done our job, you'll participate in the WellSteps campaigns and you'll be able to adapt and maintain new behaviors for the rest of your life. That's the goal. That's what it takes. What happens if you do? I mean, what happens if you participate in these behavior change campaigns? What's the real impact? I know it seems a little, it's online and you do some things and maybe you'll get a book or a cutting board, or maybe you get something, or you get an incentive or some gift cards. I mean, but what really happens? You see your results in our PHA, and you see your results in your data. But let me show you the results that we see in some of the big studies we've done. This was a large group of people, very much like you on the webinar today. Middle-aged adults between 25 and 60, all wanting to change behaviors, all wanting to improve their health. We put them through this clinical trial. This clinical trial lasted 2 years in many cases, and we tried to do two things. We tried to get them to change their behaviors and see what happened over time, and change their health risks. So here's kind of what happened. Let me just show you again. These are real people, just like you. The orange bar is the people who were in the treatment group, the people changing behaviors. The little clear invisible bars are the control group. They didn't do anything. They just gave us the data. They didn't change their lives. This is fruit and vegetable servings. So this is the servings of fruits and vegetables per day. At the beginning, they went from 4.5 to 7. 6 months later, they're still pretty high. Notice that the program caused them to almost double the amount of fruits and vegetables they were eating. The program caused them to increase the amount of whole grain servings that they were eating. Not refined flours, but whole grains. Again, food close to its natural form. We got a nice big increase in the food that they were eating, healthy foods, a nice big increase in the grains that they were eating. We got a big reduction in the amount of saturated fat, and saturated fat is the fat that comes from animal products. This is saturated fat that's in ice cream and in really fatty meats. My beloved bacon, mostly saturated fat. It's a nice decrease in saturated fat. I mean, 6 weeks, 6 months, we look at how many steps, and they use a pedometer, and they measure their physical activity patterns. Not only do they go from 40,000 steps a week, they go to 52,000. At 6 months, it's 53,000, and at 18 months, a year and a half later, they're still at it. They're about 25 to 30% more physically active a year and a half later. So we've been able to show people who will do these programs change behaviors in a very positive way. Okay, great. What does that mean? Well, look what happens to blood pressure. If you have normal or low blood pressure, it doesn't change a whole lot. But on the right of this chart, if you have high blood pressure, this is based on 2,500 people, this research that we published. We get a nice decline in systolic blood pressure. It drops about 5 or 6 points. That's about as much as you get with medication. Remember, the only thing these people did was change their lifestyle. Diastolic blood pressure that's high drops 6 points. That's a nice decline in elevated blood pressure just from changing the way they live their lives. No pill, no medication. They're not masking anything. They're dealing with the problem. The problem is their unhealthy lifestyle. What about cholesterol? People with low cholesterol dropped a little lower. People with high cholesterol dropped about 15 points, 20 points. We get a nice decline in the total amount of cholesterol. And if you're talking about diabetes, the glucose, anybody with high blood glucose at the beginning, those people dropped 11 points. Now this is after 1 year. In 12 months, their health risks are dramatically improved because we've helped them change their behaviors. Now the next slide, I always hesitate to show people, but it's the reality. And this is body mass index or weight. This group on the left, this less than 25, these are normal weight people. These are the blue, that's the average body mass index for normal weight people when they began. The red is those same people 1 year later. So if you had normal weight at the beginning, most of them had normal weight at the end. If you were overweight at the beginning, you only gained just a sliver 1 year later. If you are obese at the beginning, that's this blue bar, 35 is a BMI, you actually lost a little weight. Dr. Aldana, nobody lost a lot of weight. All these obese people are not healthy weight anymore. I agree. I wish these results looked a lot better. But do you remember those graphs I just showed you, where those charts where it goes from down lower left to upper right, and the amount of obesity is just growing exponentially across the planet? If we do nothing, people around the globe get fatter, especially in the United States. So after a year, when we look at these people, nobody got fatter. So one way to look at that is, hey, we didn't lose weight. But the good news is we didn't gain. In fact, I tell people, you don't have to lose any weight. If you'll just stop gaining, we'll be way better off. Just stop gaining. And this is kind of the results we see with that. It's so hard to not gain weight. And in this country, we're gaining weight like crazy. The fact that we stopped gaining is progress in the right direction. Is it ideal? It's not ideal. But it's the best that just about any program can do. You know people who've lost weight and then they gained it all back. You know how hard this is to do. We just want people to just say, look, don't get worse. And so we improve nutrition, we improve physical activity, we lower smoking rates, we get nice reductions in elevated health risks like blood pressure and blood glucose and blood cholesterol. Body fat, it doesn't get worse, and that's a good thing. All right, let's go a little further. This study was all about preventing chronic diseases. We demonstrated that we can lower risks and we can prevent chronic diseases. But what if you already have it? What if you already have heart disease? Here's an artery, a heart artery on the left. This image on the left is the left anterior descending coronary artery, and it's pretty blocked. If you kind of look in this space right in here, you can see where that artery is really convoluted and almost completely blocked. That's a heart attack from this point downstream in the bloodline. Here is that same artery on the right after lifestyle change. No medication, no stent. The only thing that happened is people changed their behaviors. So this is a person with disease who's able to reverse that disease with lifestyle change. Here's another one. Here's a really tight, narrow artery. This is a female. There's the artery. You can see where it's almost completely pinched off because of the plaque that's built up. On the right is the artery 6 months later after lifestyle change. This is the reversal of disease. Another way to look at this is pick your age. You can look at your age on this plot. 30 years old, 40, 50, 60, whatever your age is here, generally your arteries look about like the arteries above the age. And this is the internal, inside of the arteries. So you can, if you're 55 or 60 or 70 or 80, in most cases, for most Americans, this is kind of what it looks like. You can see the disease progresses your whole life if you have the typical American lifestyle. Here's what it looks like if you do have a healthy lifestyle. You still get a little disease at the very end, out here in the 70s and 80s, but look, most of your life, you don't have the plaques and the buildup that we have along the way. because we don't give the artery the chance to develop those. We keep a healthy lifestyle, good healthy food, regular activity. Most of the cases we prevent it. All right, let's wrap this up with this whole 10 to 20 years thing. What happens to most people? On this x-axis, they live to about the age of 76 and then they die. This is the average between men and women. And throughout your life, you have illness. And this is this y-axis. We call this morbidity or illness. Your illness gets bad and then better and bad and better. You can have a broken hip or a broken arm or get the flu or pneumonia. It goes up and down throughout your life. And somewhere out here towards the end of your life, you have a critical event. You can have a bypass, a stent, breast cancer, thyroid cancer, Parkinson's disease, at which point in time your health gets a little worse and a little worse, and then you pass away. This is most Americans right now. Most Americans die at 76. Most Americans, that death is preceded by about 7 years of relatively poor health. Welcome to America. This is what it looks like right now. Okay, what if you change? Can you teach old dogs new tricks? Is it too late for most of us? What if we decide to change? What happens to this? Well, when we change this, thing looks a little different. We still get death, but death is out there ways. It's delayed. We're going to live to 86, not 76, maybe even longer. We're not sure, but I know that range is 10 to 20 years of additional life. You still have illness throughout your life. You get sick and better, and it ebbs and flows, and you're still going to have some kind of critical event out here towards the end. And that end of life still ends with that end of life period. This was what it looks like for people who change their behaviors. Well, let's compare the two. The top one is where we are right now. The bottom one is where you can go if you're willing to change your lifestyles. Remember, both end in death. It's just that the top one has approximately 7 years. This is a 7-year period on average of a declining health before we pass away. This one is 1/3 less. This is less than 5 years, 4 years of declining health before we pass away. So we actually compress, we shorten the amount of poor health at the end of your lifetime. There's a name for this. They actually call it the compression of morbidity. We compress your end-of-life morbidity into a much shorter amount of time. But there's more. And this is the best part. It's this piece right here. It's 10 to 20 years of high-quality life at the end of your life before you pass away. That 10 to 20 years doesn't exist in the current timeline that most of us are on. Most of us are going to reach 76 on average, and that'll be the end. On this new timeline, you now pick up 10 to 20 years of high-quality life. This is 10 to 20 years of being active, serving in your community, serving in your church, doing the kinds of things you like to do, travel, hunt, fish, spend time with grandkids. This is an option on the healthy timeline. It's not an option on the current timeline. To me, that's what this is really all about. For those who are willing to adopt new behaviors and maintain those, you're going to add 10 to 20 years of extra life to your life, on average. Now, some of you might get hit by a bolt of lightning this afternoon, and sometimes it just happens. But on average, it's an extra 10 to 20 years. So one thing I don't like about this is this end-of-life piece, that end of 5 to 10 years at the very end. It's not a very pleasant time of life. We are much older and much more frail, and we wind down pretty slowly. What I want to do is I want to get rid of that end-of-life piece, that blue chunk right there. I want to get rid of that. I want to take that morbidity curve, that illness curve that bends up, I want to bend it down. I want to have a high-quality life out to the end. What I want to do is I want to be 94 years old. I'm going to be snowboarding here in the Rocky Mountains with my great-grandchildren. I'm going to lose my balance. Boom! I'm going to hit a tree, and I'm going to pass away right there on the slopes. At 94, I'm going to compress my end-of-life illness into about 4 seconds. Major cranial hematoma, major injury against a tree. I'm dead. What's the big deal? 94 years old, living a very high quality life, spending time with grandkids, doing the kinds of things I love to do, having a full high quality life, and then it's over in a flash. Now I joke, that's very unlikely to happen, but I don't joke. It's kind of what it's really all about. It's about extending and elevating the quality of our lives. 10 to 20 years is possible for those who want to eat foods closer to their natural form, who want to make the time to be physically active and avoid tobacco. And we created Well Steps for the sole purpose of helping people transform their lives to do that. With that, Ryan, if we have any questions, we can take those. And reminder, at wellsteps.com/learn, we're going to post the video that we've just done, this presentation, and the slides will be posted there. You can have those and use them any way you wish. Ryan?
Thank you so much, Steve. Just one quick note. We have switched and we have now posted the slides on wellsteps.com/events, which is the same place you all went to first register for this webinar, and the slides will also be posted there, or sorry, the recorded version later today. So wellsteps.com/events.
Thanks, Ryan. It's amazing you're able to do that magical technology on the fly.
Exactly. Well, Steve, I want to thank you first for giving us that great information. We realize some of you are on a lunch break or have taken some time out of your work day, and if you need to leave, we would excuse you at this point. We do have a few questions here. The first is just a detail. At the beginning, you were showing kind of the progression of obesity, over the years. There was a question on what is the definition of obesity, first of all, and has that definition changed at all over time?
You can just Google up anywhere on the web BMI, as in baby, B as in boy, BMI calculator. And you can enter your weight and your height in inches, and it'll give you a BMI score. The definition that we use in those studies is a BMI for obesity is anything above 30 or greater. Overweight is 25 to 30. The most common question we get is, have they changed the cut points? Have they changed those scores? And the answer is no. They have been rock solid for 80 years. We have never changed those cut points. They are the same. They have been forever. The only thing that has changed is us. For 95% of the population, body mass index is a pretty good predictor of your body fat and your weight. It's pretty accurate. For people who are large boned and heavily, very muscular, not fat, not thick, not stout, muscular. Think of a linebacker in football. A football linebacker or a football fullback. The BMI does not work for them because they have a lot of muscle mass. If you really want to know what your body fat is, you can get your body fat tested. A lot of gyms will test it for you. A lot of fitness centers can test it for you pretty quickly. That's a more accurate measure. But for 95% of the people, body mass index is pretty spot on. You won't like it. Most of you will do it, and you won't like what you see. Another test is just to get naked and stand in front of the mirror. I know it's pretty simple.
There you go. Another question, so you had said in the beginning, a lot of times within a family you'll see a lot of the same disease, and we sometimes attribute that to genetics, but often it's just kind of the family situation you're in. So we can't trade our family, so what can we do when people around us are not adopting this sort of healthy lifestyle? Obviously we can go it alone, but what are some things that we can do to make that a little easier?
It's always easier if someone will join with you, a spouse, a significant other. We, at our house, have a yellow lab named Dixie. Some of you know Dixie. Dixie likes to walk twice a day. She likes to walk. That's what I call puppy peer pressure. It's good. It's good to have others supporting your activities. If you don't have that, you're going to have to go it alone. But you can find a walking partner. You can find people at work who want to think like you. We do teams with our Well Steps campaigns, and you can get team members to go with you. It can be anybody who can go with you. Family members, baby steps. If you come home today and say, I talked to Dr. Aldana, and today we're eating food in its natural form from now on, People are going to get angry. But you could change breakfast. You could introduce a healthy lunch. You could start doing a few things slowly. I call baby steps. It's this whole business of Kaizen. Big things happen with small steps. So take some small steps and don't expect too much too quick from people, or you just scare them away.
Thank you. We have a question here from James. He asked, how does emotional or psychological health and issues affect, I guess he says morbidity, but just in general, affect our lifestyle? And how do we tie that into all of this that you talked about? You talked about the big three, but I guess how do other issues?
And I don't want to diminish any other health factors that we struggle with, and there are many. Stress is a big one. Emotional and mental health is a big one. Having access to clean air and pollution, and there's a lot of things on that list. Today, lack of time, I focus just on the big three. Sleep is a big one on that list. Our WellSteps campaigns, we go through the list. Sleep campaigns, sugar campaigns, how to get saturated fat down, we go through all of the factors. Is why we build campaigns to help people to change. I don't want to diminish them, and they're real and they're important. Stress, depending on where you work, is a huge factor. Mental, emotional factor, they're just really important. They're just not part of our discussion today, and I don't want to diminish them by leaving them out. But if I could get people to do the three big ones, exercise regularly, eat a healthy diet, and not smoke, some of those emotional and mental issues, like depression, are greatly affected by influencing the first three. So, again, we've got some great campaigns to help do a lot of those things.
Thank you. You kind of showed what can happen for us at the end of our lives with extending the length and quality of life. I guess there's a question here. What are some of the benefits that someone can experience immediately that might, we like the instant gratification. What benefits might they experience by, immediately by making those types of changes?
I showed some of that data in my slides here. And you say, well, you want immediate. Let me just go back up and show you again real briefly. This data that we published on behaviors, this data right here, this is 6 weeks. We have risk data that says in as little as 6 weeks, cholesterol drops, glucose drops, blood pressure drops. They're amazing. It's as little as short as 6. I think that happens even less than that. I think it can happen in 2 weeks. Some of these changes. And these are risk factors, and you wouldn't know about them unless you measured them. But they change in as little as 6 weeks. In terms of fitness and getting out and walking, we know that benefits start to arrive just in the first 10 minutes. You may not feel them, but they're there. The first 2 weeks, you start to notice. You start to feel better. You're less tired. You have more energy. It does take some time. But 6 weeks is a great way to start to see a ton of changes. I like our sleep campaign. Good night. In just one night, we can improve the quality of your sleep if you'll just follow the right strategies and tools. So most of the benefits happen very quickly.
Perfect. One other question we've got here. Now we're looking for a magic bullet here, the magic answer. There's a question from Michael. What is the best thing I can do to lower blood pressure? So it might be a personal question for Michael, but anyway, if you want to touch specifically on that or just in general.
Yeah, I will. We talked about the big three: nutrition, physical activity, and tobacco. I don't care if it's high blood pressure or high blood glucose or high blood cholesterol or high blood inflammation like hemoglobin A1C. It's the same recipe. It's the same solution. So if you go see your doctor, he's going to take your blood pressure and say, Bob, your blood pressure is high. Step 1 in his manuals is called TLC, Therapeutic Lifestyle Change. Step 1 for diabetes, for cholesterol, for blood pressure, for glucose, it's the same one. Step 1, lifestyle change. After you've made aggressive and serious commitment and you've really changed your lifestyle, if your blood pressure's still high, then it's time to start down the medications. But most physicians are pretty skeptical that you're going to change behaviors because bacon tastes so dang good. And they think you won't change. So the first thing they see when you have high blood pressure is here's the medication, take the medication. They skip TLC, therapeutic lifestyle change. So the process, really go back to foods in their natural form. In your case with blood pressure, lower sodium, more fruits and vegetables, more physical activity, lose some weight, get on that. If those things happen, your blood pressure will come down. If it doesn't come down far enough, then it's time for blood pressure medication.
Perfect. I just want to address one question. I don't want to end on this, but there was a question about good oils. You know, you showed the pyramid. We have a campaign called Good Fat, Bad Fat, and we differentiate. There is a big difference on the health impact of different types of oils. So there are good oils out there. I don't know if you want to touch on that at all. That's not the final question I want to ask, but I did want to address that there is very large variation in the health value of different types of oils and other things like that.
Yeah, just real quickly, animals have mostly high saturated fat oils, not so good. Trans fats, that's been a highly altered fat, not good at all. Your poly and monounsaturated fats that mostly come from plants, you're pretty good. You're pretty good to go. And I don't really care what you have them, olive oil. You know, think of what the Italians eat, the Sicilians eat, the Greeks eat. You're good to go. Last question?
Okay, great. That was for Jeff. The last one is just, you talked about kind of where our culture has gone, where we're at basically. Is there anything that we can do as individuals or as companies and things like that to kind of stem that tide and change the culture, around us, whether it's individually or on a larger scale?
This is a whole series of different presentations, but I've been to Congress, I've talked to the senators, I've been to Washington, we've worked with the federal government. They can't even agree on the time of day. It's rare that we're going to see any kind of state or federal policy coming down to help us make this easier. That said, it happens from the bottom up. It's you, your spouse, your significant other, your family. What do you guys do today at your home to create a culture of health at home? There are certain foods you do or don't eat. There are certain places you go out to eat, certain places you don't. You make time for physical activity. You make it a habit to have healthy meals at home. It's a culture that you create at home. That's the first easy step to do it. I'd love to see some help from federal governments. I'd like to see some changes from the industry and the market. That's very unlikely to happen. It's going to happen at a grassroots level from individuals, people by themselves, one at a time. Families will continue to start to make progress, and then those different families and groups will link together, and the entire thing will rise as the individuals start to rise. Restaurants will respond with healthier foods, and schools will start to get involved, and church groups can do some great things here. This is a bottom-up approach, top-down. There's too many people making too much money in the current system, both in industry and in politics, to ever change this, in my skeptical opinion. But I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think it was possible. 10 to 20 years is available to those that are strong enough and able to work together to move in this direction. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you. Yeah, we're at over an hour now, so we appreciate everything so much.
Thanks, everyone.